Story 1. I can speak a few words of Polish. I have a Polish grandmother. I put proficient in Polish on my resume when applying to law school and forgot all about it. I applied to a job without thinking about that. Fast forward and I am on a train in Poland. My work flew me there to make a good impression on a big client. Thankfully, they were kind and spoke English. Story 2. There was a neighbor, whom I will call Jay, that no one seemed to like on my block. I don't know why. I keep to myself. My wife used to babysit my little 4-year-old nephew at our house. Before work on weekdays, I would take my nephew for a run up and down the block to get him some exercise. One day, Jay was out in front of his home and asked if that was my son. I told him no, he is my sister's child, and we take care of him. Then Jay started telling me how good it was of me to do that because his own mom was a drug addict when he was about that age, and his aunt took him in and raised him. Apparently, he thought I had taken my nephew in and my wife and I were raising him as our own. He went on about how well I was doing and offered many compliments. He seemed to bond and connect. I didn't want him to ruin the moment with the truth, so I just let it slide and didn't say it was just babysitting. I figured I rarely saw him anyway. From then on, Jay would be out front most mornings watching for us. We would wave, but of course I would not stop so I wouldn't have to talk. After about a year, my nephew enrolled in preschool, so we only had him on Saturdays while his mom worked. No more block running. Phew. But then Jay saw me at the grocery store, a captive audience in the checkout line, and asked why no more block running. I told him that he was with his mom and only over on Saturdays now. Jay then said how proud he was of my sister for getting custody back and wished her a clean recovery. That caught me off guard. I just thanked him, tried to look occupied by my groceries, checked out, and left as fast as possible. Anyway, to my great relief, he moved away soon after. I never had to confess about that one. Story 3. When someone asked if I was good with Microsoft Excel, in my limited knowledge, I said I love it. I barely knew how to sum a column. It just slipped out, and I thought they were making small talk. Big mistake, because the very next week, my manager asked me to do the sales dashboard. I panicked, but instead of coming clean, I doubled down. I stayed up until 3 a.m. watching online tutorials. That dashboard was sent to corporate. They loved it and started sending me more Microsoft Excel tasks. I became the unofficial Microsoft Excel expert. Story 4. When I was in 5th grade, I lied about being from Germany. I told everyone I knew German. They would ask me how to say things. Now, I am going to minor in German at college and maybe move there for a career in physics. I guess goal accomplished. Story 5. It's 2006 and the Xbox 360 was the sensation worldwide. Wanting to be the cool kid in 4th grade, I told everyone that my dad was the general manager at our local Best Buy. In reality, my dad has always worked in construction. That lie led me to promise very cheap Xbox 360 consoles to a few classmates. They, of course, went home and told their parents, who were eager to pay a quarter of the price for one of these consoles. This resulted in one kid's dad showing up after school with money in hand, following me to my mom's car and trying to convince her to ask my dad to help him. To this day, I do not understand why I made that lie. Story 6. Not really a lie, more a lack of correction. I lived in an apartment, and the sweet lady downstairs, who fed stray cats and wore an Eeyore sweater, called me Sarah one day. Not my name. I didn't correct her, and enough time passed that it felt awkward to correct her at this point, so I just responded to Sarah when I heard her. One day, I was working from home and heard someone desperately knocking on my door. I hurried over, and there was the lady in the Eeyore sweater, gasping for air. She had apparently taken her metformin, and the large pill had gotten lodged in her throat. She was in a panic. I called emergency services, and they came to take her to the hospital. She gave me her husband's number so I could call him and tell him where his wife was. I called. He didn't answer, so I left a message. Your wife had a pill stuck in her throat. She is okay, but they are taking her to the hospital for an endoscopy. He called me back a few minutes later and immediately asked, "Who is this?" I sighed and said, "This is Sarah." I decided this was really not the time to correct my name, and now I just am Sarah. I received Christmas cards from the lady every year after that until we moved. The cards were addressed to my husband by his correct name, my daughter by her correct name, and Sarah. Story 7. A guy who would later become one of my very best friends had just moved to our school in 7th grade. We will call him W. He was scrawny and kind of sickly looking. I thought it was hilarious to tell people that he was terminally ill. I had another best friend, we will call him M. M finally had a conversation with W. M explained that he was sorry for being distant and keeping W at arm's length. He just did not want to get close to someone who was going to die. W responded, "Wait, I am going to die?" The three of us are still close and we laugh about it now, but it was pretty messed up. Story 8. I needed work, so I said I could be outgoing and interact with strangers. In reality, I could just make coffee, something I love to do, and others could deal with customers. Simple. I am now a theme park magician. I spend my days chatting with strangers. I pretended long enough that it became true. Story 9. In 7th grade at a school dance, I put my hand in a girl's back pocket of her jeans while we were slow dancing. A friend saw it and told a group of boys that I put my hand down her pants. When confronted, I said I had, thinking they meant I put my hand in her pocket. That turned into them interpreting it to mean I touched her inappropriately while we were dancing. The story grew, and eventually it was too far gone, so I just went along with it. By the time we got to the next dance a month later, the story had gotten back to her. She set the story straight by verbally confronting me on the dance floor in front of everyone. Story 10. I live in a different state than my parents. They were worried about me because I was going through a depressive phase. I started dating a new man, and they were very happy for me. I believe they thought a new relationship was evidence that I had pulled myself out of my funk. For months later, the relationship ended. The man was not very kind. I was more depressed than ever, but I did not want to tell my family and make them worry, especially since we could not see each other regularly. For 2.5 more months, I pretended I was still dating this man whenever we spoke. "Oh yeah, I went to visit someone this weekend," or "Oh, he and I just got back from a hike." Then they came to visit, and I had to admit that the boyfriend was no longer in the picture. I lied again about the timeline, saying we had mutually decided a week before to take a break. It did not really spiral out of control, I suppose. It was just awkward for 2 to 3 months to be in a pretend relationship with a boyfriend who no longer existed. Story 11. Okay, so I was working for a large firm, and as a joke, I explained to a few people about the dangers of dihydrogen monoxide. You know, how it is a byproduct of nuclear power, has found its way into our food chain, and has even been found in increasing amounts in kids' toys. I even explained to a facilities manager how it has been linked to Legionnaire's disease and has been found in corporate heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. Anyway, the next thing I heard was that the facilities manager was about to recommend that the company do a check for dihydrogen monoxide at all sites globally and was putting it on the agenda for a global meeting for facilities. So I rang him and explained that dihydrogen monoxide is the chemical name for water. I often wonder what would have happened if I had let him run with it. Story 12. I'm mixed race, half black, and am a teacher in a small village in Spain that isn't my hometown. One day, one of my 9-year-old students asked me what I did for Semana Santa, the spring and Easter holidays, and I said that I drove up to France with my family. The kid, being little and at that time only associating France with Paris Saint-Germain and Kylian Mbappé, asked me if I saw Mbappé. I sarcastically said, "Yeah, he's my cousin. How did you know?" The kids were doubtful at first until one of them said, "No, she looks like Mbappé," and they got more excited about it. The kids were so excited and asked for pictures. So I said, "No way. I keep my personal life private." The kids refused to let this go and asked me to message Mbappé. This was honestly a very rowdy class, so I told them if they were good for the rest of the month, I would tell Mbappé to send them a message and a picture of our class. The kids were perfect angels. Even when one kid thought to act out, the others would correct his behavior for me. At the end of the month, the kids expected the Mbappé voice message. I panicked but remembered I had a friend from France, and I asked him to help. He changed his WhatsApp picture and I changed his name in my contacts to Kylian. At the end of the month, as promised, I sent a group picture to my friend. He sent a voice note in a mix of French and Spanish congratulating us for our good work and telling us to keep doing well. The kids were ecstatic, and they told everyone that they spoke to Mbappe. The whole town knew me as the cousin of Mbappe, and random strangers would ask me about my cousin, asking how I feel about him transferring to Madrid, if I'm excited to have him near me, and if I can convince him to swing by the village. One day, I had a parent-teacher conference with the parent of a student who wasn't even in that class. At the end of the meeting, she told me that her son is a huge fan of my cousin and that he's a huge source of inspiration. Story 13. Technically, I did not lie, but it looked like I was being rude. I moved to another country from Canada. I played ball and street hockey growing up like most boys do. I never learned to ice skate. I was talking at lunch with another Canadian coworker and some other international colleagues about the good old days of leading our boys' league in scoring and also scoring 7 goals in one game in ball hockey. One of the international colleagues who tried to impress management overheard this and told the chief financial officer that we have a Canadian superstar who was just hired and should be on the company's men's ice hockey team. I ended up receiving a visit from our Ivy League chief executive officer from Connecticut. He asked me about home and what level I played hockey at. I answered jokingly that I played at the highest level, not once thinking that they were recruiting me to play ice hockey. When he asked which National Hockey League team, I laughed and realized this rumor had gotten way out of control. Story 14. Not too serious, but I didn't want to go to school several Mondays ago, so I obviously lied and told my mom I had a serious headache. I felt completely fine to avoid going to school. This was during the time when schools were open but COVID-19 was still present. I spent the whole day in bed on my phone, watching videos and giggling. The next day, I started to fake a cough to skip school again, and they believed me somehow. Throughout the day, I was coughing quite a lot as well, which made it more believable. Then my dad came home from work early because his office did COVID-19 tests, and his test came back positive. Only he was positive, so he couldn't have gotten it from his coworkers, which means one thing. Could he have gotten it from me? My sister rarely gets sick and wasn't showing any signs, and my mom wasn't showing signs either, so all the signs pointed to me. But how? I was just faking. Could I have gotten it the week before from my classmates? Maybe. Someone's sibling had tested positive, but I didn't really talk to her a lot, so it's unlikely. Anyway, I took the test and it came back positive, so I didn't have to go to school for a few weeks, thankfully. The next day, on Wednesday, my mom started to cough just like me and my dad. To be sure, she took a test and it also came back positive. We wondered who she could have gotten it from. Couldn't have been my dad since he started working from home and took over the living room, even sleeping on the couch instead of next to my mom, just to make sure he didn't infect anyone else. I guess there couldn't have been anyone else but me. I got COVID-19 and infected 2 other people, and it all started from me faking a headache. Story 15. I was in college. My little sister and her best friend came up to visit. Inevitably, people asked, "Who are these 2 girls you're hanging out with?" For no reason, I said, "These are my sisters. The one that looks nothing like me is the adopted one." They went along with it, and it was just a funny joke for the weekend. For years, people thought I had 2 sisters, and I never bothered to correct them because it wasn't important. I still saw her around a lot. She would even come over on family holidays, and we'd always take a holiday family photo with her. It was just a dumb running joke. Then the girls finished high school and went to different colleges. Apparently, they had a huge fight and haven't spoken to each other since. Without my sister maintaining that relationship, I lost my connection with her friend. Again, not the end of the world. I enjoyed her being around, but she wasn't really my friend. Sometime later, I went to a job interview, and the interviewer turned out to be the older brother of a friend. We started talking about families, and at one point he said, "Yeah, you've got 2 little sisters, right?" I said, "No, just one." He moved on. But that night, my friend, the interviewer's little brother, texted me asking about my sisters. I still can't wrap my head around how it spiraled or what I said wrong, but it turned into a weird mess of me being called a liar. I didn't get the job because the interviewer had concerns about my integrity. It became a bigger deal than it should have within the friend group, causing a rift that cost me friends. I still don't understand why anyone cared so much. I certainly don't care that much about their siblings. Part of me thinks they were overreacting and making a big deal out of a harmless situation. But on the other hand, they felt it was enough to stop being my friends. So, am I a bad person? I like to tell myself I'm not the weird one here, but their reactions made me second-guess myself. Anyway, it's all in the past. I ran into the friend at a wedding 3 or 4 years ago. She's doing great, and we got back on friendly terms. My wife and I went to her wedding last year. Somehow, she never heard about all the drama, although she moved far away from our hometown and never went back. Story 16. I used to drive a Zamboni around the maintenance base for a major airline. The vehicle moved like 2 miles an hour, and the maintenance base was literally thousands of acres, so I spent a significant portion of the day just puttering along from one side of the base to the other between all the buildings I had to drive through. One day, while crossing the base, a small golf cart full of people in suits pulled up alongside me. The driver told me to stop, then got out and started asking why I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. I figured he was just a supervisor from one of the front offices trying to show off in front of his underlings. I just wanted to continue on my way, so without thinking, I lied and said it was broken. He said that if it was broken, then the vehicle was inoperable and should be taken to vehicle maintenance. I agreed and turned around to start my 20-minute trip back across the base, annoyed that I was now behind schedule. I figured I would take my break, then go back out again, and that guy could just go away. Only this time I would wear my seatbelt. When I got back to my shop and sat down for my break, my boss called, upset and wanting to know why his boss had just called him about the Zamboni being broken. I realized I had messed up, but I was in too deep at this point, so I kept with it and said the seatbelt was broken. He told me to take it to vehicle maintenance to get it fixed. So now, I was driving this thing across the base again. Only this time I was freaking out because I knew I had messed up and had no idea what I was going to tell the vehicle maintenance guys since the seatbelt obviously wasn't broken. When I pulled up to vehicle maintenance, 3 mechanics I knew were waiting in front of their shop with the biggest grins, holding a replacement buckle. For the next 15 minutes, as they replaced the buckle, I had to sit there while they gave me a hard time about not recognizing the CEO of the company. They told me how, after talking to me, he had immediately called my boss's boss and the head of vehicle maintenance to make sure I took the Zamboni in. I was lucky these 3 liked me because they covered for me. For the rest of the time I worked there, half the mechanics on base would yell out, "Buckle up for safety," anytime I drove by. Story 17. 10 years ago, before Costco became strict, I borrowed my sister's card to buy a bunch of drinks for an event. After loading everything and heading to checkout, I realized I had dropped the card somewhere in the store. I searched everywhere, finally gave up, and went to customer service to have it reprinted. First, they asked for my name and phone number for the account. I lied and said I just got a new number and couldn't remember it, then quickly pulled up my sister's cell phone. Nope, wrong number. I then had to search my phone for my husband's number, which I also always got wrong. Luckily, that was the right one, but it was under a company name. They asked if I could verify the name. Lucky guess, it was my brother-in-law's family company. After fumbling my way through, there was no way the customer service representative believed me, but he apparently didn't care. He said, "All right, we're all set. Just step over here so we can take your picture." I was mortified, but since I had lied the whole way through, I smiled, paid, and left. For years, my sister used her Costco card with my picture on it and thought it was hilarious. Story 18. Whenever people ask where I live, I get really cautious, so I say I am from a few miles away. When they ask for specifics, I just say, close to, city or mall. Usually it ends there, but when they start naming specific places or ways to get to those places, I start lying, saying yes or I think so. The problem is I do not drive yet and have no sense of direction, so agreeing has caused people to ask again. I then tell them I have moved or that is where I am staying right now. People probably think I am homeless or a couch surfer by now. Story 19. I said I was an expert businessman and a real estate mogul, and people somehow believed me. Now I am president, and I do not know what I am doing. I keep doing more outrageous things, hoping someone will stop me, but they never do. I fear they might actually let me destroy an entire country. Story 20. I was at work when a gay coworker started hitting on me. It wouldn't have been a big deal on its own, but something told me this guy was not very reasonable, which later proved true. I told him I had a girlfriend, and that was it. He asked me to play a game with him since Helldivers 2 had just come out, but I told him I was doing something with Jane Doe, a female friend I am not dating. I had asked her out, but she said no. Nothing really came of it. Jane and I ended up having a huge fight, though I didn't realize we were fighting at the time. She started lying to our mutual friends, saying I was an awful person who made fun of her body, claiming I said I had bigger breasts than her, which I denied and responded to only a month later, which upset her. She also accused me of being a big fan of Andrew Tate, which I am not, and said I wouldn't leave her alone, even though she texted me as much as I did. Our friends believed her and removed me from the group. This all happened after I injured my back and missed a week of work, and my car broke down, costing $3,000 to fix. I went to work feeling down, and when asked about it, they wanted to know if Jane and I had broken up. Not wanting to clarify that we were never dating, I just said, yeah. Now there's a big story at work about how my non-existent girlfriend and I broke up and hate each other. Story 21. This was when I was about 5 years old, so please do not judge me. I once called the police and said, "Help me, I am being attacked," then tried to hang up, but they did not disconnect on their end. This was when we had a home phone, so it was not easy to hang up on someone if they stayed on the line. The operator remained on the other end, and I desperately tried to get them off the phone, even unplugging the phone and plugging it back in, but they were still there. Eventually, my sister told my mother, who answered the phone, spoke to the operator, apologized, and then got angry with me. Story 22. I once said my room smelled like fresh flowers to cover up the mess, and it turned into a whole fake air freshener story, much more complicated than it should have been. Story 23. I told my friend in elementary school that I was a year older than him. For about 15 years, he always asked why my birthday cake was missing a candle, and I would always make up a silly reason for it. Story 24. Sometimes when I'm at a casino or meeting new people, I give a fake name just for fun. I met 3 guys while playing blackjack and gave them a fake name in front of the dealer. The dealer and I are friends, and I thought I had given her my real name before, but it turns out I hadn't. So when she said, "Mark, you don't drink, do you?" After offering me a drink that I declined, I said no and thought she was playing along. 2 girls I knew from high school then sat down next to me. After they recognized me, they called me by my real name, James. By this time, the dealer was already busy, so she didn't hear that I told the 3 friends I had lied about my name. The next time I visited and saw my dealer friend, she called me Mark again. I still thought she was just playing along, but over 2 months later, she still calls me Mark. I realized she doesn't know my real name, and I have decided not to tell her. Now everyone at the casino knows my name is James, except her, who thinks my name is Mark. Story 25. Told my boyfriend I was great at skiing to avoid looking inexperienced. He surprised me with a ski trip to the Alps for our anniversary. I spent 3 months secretly taking lessons at an indoor slope and nearly broke my arm. We are still married, but he did not find out until our honeymoon when I got drunk and confessed. Story 26. I am okay. I had Lyme disease, which led to a traumatic brain injury caused by coordination issues. After 10 years of being very unwell and non-functional, it has caught up to me. My family now knows that I am struggling significantly. It is not easy being discovered, but I am finally getting the help I need. Story 27. When I was 13, I had a crush on a girl who was 15. In the teenage world, that's like a 25-year-old trying to date a 40-year-old. I told her I was 15 too. I almost made it through the whole summer before someone I knew casually mentioned my real age in front of her. I told her he didn't know my age. She started checking and asking around. I tried harder to cover it up, but in the end, she suspected the truth and stopped hanging out with me. Story 28. I was in elementary school and taking a walk with my mom and grandma, and I was upset that they weren't paying attention to me. So I ran ahead of them, found the wall between my backyard and the walking path, and lay down in front of it. My plan was that when my mom and grandma caught up with me, I would say that I was trying to climb the wall, but I fell and broke my ankle. They would be sure to dote all over me then. About half an hour passed, and without my knowledge, they had taken another turn and made it home without passing me. They didn't even realize I was gone. I was committed to my bit and wasn't going to break character now. Two old ladies walked by and asked if I was okay. So I went full speed ahead with my original plan and told them, no, I fell and I think I broke my ankle. They asked where my parents lived, and I gave them instructions on how to get to the front of my house, which was a 10-minute walk out of the way. They went to my house, my mom came over, found me, and carried me home on her back. She was being really nice. I got home and everyone was fawning over me. My plan was a huge success. My dad, who was a physician, even looked at my ankle and said, oh, it looks like it might really be broken. I just have weird bulgy ankles. My mom called the doctor to ask if I could be seen today. My stomach dropped. Why do I need to see a doctor? You need to get an X-ray to see if you really broke your ankle. Does that cost money? Yes, but don't worry about that. It's important. Well, actually, funny story. Everyone was furious with me. My grandparents never let me live it down. Years later, when I broke my wrist while they were visiting, no one believed me, and my parents didn't even take me to the doctor for an entire week. Story 29. The kid next to me in class really liked my drawing of the Ghostbusters logo. He asked me to make one for him but smaller. I had traced it and had no idea how to make one smaller, so I spent the rest of the school year making excuses for why I still hadn't done it. Story 30. Yes, I'm good at math, said the high school student who truly hated math with a passion and was average at best. I took normal math classes and was never in honors or advanced placement level courses. I barely passed pre-calculus in my senior year of high school. Fast forward, and I am now a financial analyst with a bachelor's degree in finance. Oh, the irony. Story 31. Not a lie, but a joke that got twisted and blown up in a ridiculous fashion. In ninth grade, I went on a youth group trip one weekend. Long story short, at one point during the retreat, a group of us kids, boys and girls, were talking and joking around. The subject of sex came up because we were 15. A girl I had just met said something like, "We could all have an orgy and the church adults would never know." Then she did a fake orgasm calling my name, when Harry Met Sally style. "Oh, Soul Captain. Oh, yeah. We all laughed, and that was it. The youth group retreat continued without incident. I went back to school on Monday, and we were talking about what we did over the weekend. I relayed the story above. Either I embellished it and implied that I had sex, or someone incorrectly inferred that I implied that I had sex. Either way, that started a rumor that somehow spread throughout my grade and probably other grades. The rumor was that I was bragging about having had sex over the weekend. By the end of the day, people were coming up to me and asking, "Really? You did? Or you've got to be kidding me, you didn't do anything." One guy in gym class, after someone apparently told him, laughed out loud and pointed at me from across the gym. I tried to correct people, but it was an uphill battle. I thought the misunderstanding was funny at first, but as the day and week went on, I became embarrassed. I realized there was no way I could convince people of the truth. To this day, I am sure that if anyone remembers this incident, they probably remember it as me bragging about having sex. And it has been decades now. Story 32. I love you to a toxic girl. I was not aware of it. And then the worst part of my life started. Getting rid of this was very difficult. Story 33. When I was in high school, my friend and I skipped out for an hour or two. We got caught by our principal when we returned to school, and we lied to the school, saying we had been pulled over by the police who decided to search the car. Getting pulled over and having our car searched had happened to us before while we were not in school, so it was a real experience we had already had. Our principal actually called the police department to verify our story, and when they told her it never happened, she had the police chief come to the school so we could file a police report. It turned out the fabricated police officer we described matched the description of a fake officer they had been investigating. I finally admitted it was all a lie and that we just wanted to go out to lunch at the mall because we both hated school and the bad food we got for lunch every day. The police chief then threatened us with a felony charge for filing a false police report. I told him that our principal was the one who called him, not us, and we did not even know he was there or that we would be filing a police report until we were pulled into the same room with him. Our principal decided to suspend us for 5 days. Being pulled over by the police probably was not the best lie, but sometimes teenagers just do not want to be in school, especially if they are already working 40-hour weeks on top of school, as I was at the time. Just give them detention and leave them alone. Story 34. I told someone I was good at pickpocketing, which I was not. His name was Gavin. Literally an hour and a half later, his friend, who actually jumped off a bridge last year, took his money, around $600. Then Gavin blamed it on me. Soon, I was almost pushed off the bus. We had to pull over to get him off me. He got expelled and I got suspended for stealing, which I did not do. I ended up with 2 chipped teeth, a broken nose, and total embarrassment. To the friend who died last year, you are remembered. Story 35. I once had a dream where I was back in high school and pretended to be paralyzed. It was a whole dream-long ordeal. Story 36. It wasn't me, but my friends leaned into ambiguity over whether they had some kind of open relationship. When she got pregnant, a lot of questions arose. There was anger over the spreading of rumors until the situation was clarified. The girl realized they had taken the joke too far. We only suspected impropriety because they kept hinting at it without ever directly including the rest of us. When I asked the other guy involved, she told him to say he didn't remember what happened, which made things worse because he's not the type to black out and appeared unusually sober that night. She was furious at first, but when I explained it, she laughed so hard she was falling out of her chair, realizing she had brought it on herself. Story 37. I told a friend about a character transformation being capable of flying in a video game, even though I was using a device. Story 38. In high school, I told a classmate that I could play the piano. I meant just a few notes from a tutorial. A week later, I was asked to perform at a school talent show. Instead of admitting I had lied, I spent 2 weeks learning one song nonstop. I barely pulled it off with my hands shaking the whole time. People still think I am a pianist to this day, and I have no idea how to undo it without seeming like a complete fraud. Story 39. I had a peripherally inserted central catheter line for chemotherapy when I had cancer about 8 years ago. People often asked what it was for. I was in a shop in a bad mood one day, and when a little old woman asked what it was for, I snapped back, methadone. A few hours later, my mother asked why her friend's mother thought I was on drugs. I have a very distinctive van, which she saw me get into and then saw outside my parents' place half a mile down the road. Story 40. I'm odd. I like to do accents. One night, drunk, in the queue for the bank machine, the guy in front's card got swallowed by the machine for too many wrong personal identification number attempts. I broke into an Irish accent and said, "Sure, don't you worry, I'll see you right," and gave him a 10-pound note. Cut to later with my friends, and the guy shows up. Turns out he's a boyfriend from out of town of one of my friends. Irish guy. He went on to explain how I'm such a good guy and how Irish people are the best. University had 3 more years to go, and every time he visited, I was the Irish guy for a few days. Crazy. Story 41. My friends and I decided to pretend we were in flight attendant training when we went out near the university campus in the city where we grew up because we knew the guys we met would find it surprisingly attractive. Later, I lost focus and started telling guys I was a chemistry major. One guy I talked to was really trying to connect and ask me questions about my professors. I began ignoring him. He asked, "Why wouldn't you tell me whose class you're in?" I'm sure he realized I was lying, which must have been confusing because who pretends to study chemistry to meet men? Story 42. I graduated high school. My girlfriend at the time got very upset when she found out I had dropped out. Story 43. I was high and with my family, so I was pretending to be normal. I accidentally said, "Damn, I'm locked in." Story 44. When I was in school, I stole some money from my mother's wallet. She asked my father if he had taken the money, And then they started interrogating me. Story 45. I told my mom as a joke that I thought Doritos were disgusting, overprocessed, and really mediocre. I committed to that for 4 months, rejecting every offer of Doritos and was too scared to break the tension and explain that it was just a one-time joke. Story 46. I pretended to have a job for a couple of months. Actually, I had found an excellent source for herbs and was paying bills doing that. Then I upset his wife and couldn't pay the rent. I lost my house. Story 47. Passed out on the morning after New Year because I spent all night watching Dragon Ball Z. I told my parents it was because of the sleeping pill. It escalated to the doctor who gave it to me, asking me to get a reduced dose because it was too strong for me. Story 48. I told my trivia friend group at the local bar that I had my doctorate degree when I actually only had my bachelor's degree. A man showed up and agreed to help me. Quickly spiraled out of control. He built an exact 1-to-1 scale replica of the bar just to rehearse potential conversations. Then he created a family of actors and really confused a 6-year-old child. He later became a fully trained commercial airline pilot. That was weird. It really got away from me. Story 49. In my defense, I did and do look like her, but I told children in school I was the girl from the Pepsi commercials. Story 50. My first high school girlfriend could not eat shellfish for religious reasons. Being the foolish kid I was, I lied and said I was allergic to shellfish. That was 14 years ago, and I still want to know what all the hype around lobster is. Story 51. Once, I told my daughter's teacher that I was fluent in French to seem impressive at a parent-teacher conference. Somehow, I got roped into teaching the French club. Thank God for Duolingo and my acting skills because those kids actually started learning something. I am still terrified of running into actual French speakers. Story 52. My friend skipped school and did not want to get in trouble for lying. That is how he ended up having surgery to remove his appendix. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.